Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and you're very welcome to this conference today. First presentation is, and first level control, as Rosa said there, looking at the overview role and what we do and what we don't. Next slide, please. So there's a table of contents. We look at FLC. We're going to look at regulatory requirements for FLC, the different systems, the role of the first level controller in more detail, in terms then of FLC, what we do and basically what we don't. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so first level control, what is it? Definition of first level control. Okay, right. All expenses declared by a project partner has to be checked by a responsible first level control FLC body. They have to be verified. They have to verify the delivery of the project products, the deliverables in line with the related expenses, the soundness of the expenditure, declared compliance with the expenditure community rules, especially the eligibility rules and national rules. So these are what basically the programs term as first level controls. Next slide, please. Okay, so definition again, what is it? Basically, there are audits or checks of program expenditure. When does it happen? It happens during project implementation each time before we submit a payment claim to the lead partner, which will be part of the composite claim basically, and submission to the Secretariat for processing and payment. Why are first level control checks carried out? Basically to provide a guarantee to the managing authority and to the certifying authority that the project partner and the cost co-finance are accounted for and eligible basically in compliance with the eligibility rules. Next slide. We're going to look at the regulatory requirements now for first level control. Next slide. Regulatory requirements basically is the managing authority is responsible for the financial management and control of the program as set out in Article 125 subsection 4 Regulation 1303/2013. But the organisation of the control is the responsibility of the partner state based on Article 23.4 of Regulation 1299/2013, which states that each member state shall designate a body or person responsible for carrying out such verifications. Next slide. Okay, now we'll have a look at the different systems. So as you can see there in this slide, first level control, basically we have centralized first level control and decentralized first level control. So I suppose centralized first level control, and that the system that Ireland had chosen back in 2008, the Department of Finance at the time nominated the regional assemblies as designated control appropriation bodies, and we were asked basically to conduct the first level control checks on the various ETC programs. Centralized control system, decentralized control system. This is where a partner basically puts forward an individual or a body or an agency or whatever for to be approved as first level control. They have to go through a number of checks basically in terms of their academic qualifications, experience, knowledge, rules and regulations and so forth. And basically the appropriation certificate is issued in, and then that agency or body or individual is responsible for conducting the first level control and that project partner for the duration of the project. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have a summary basically of the various systems, centralized and decentralized systems. So you can see in the first part of the slide there, there's 15 agency member states, and Ireland is one of those states that basically have opted for the centralized system. The decentralized system, then you can see there's a number of states there as well, and the UK were also had chosen basically the decentralized system. Next slide, please. Okay, so role of the first level control. So what's the role of FLC? Okay, so first level controller's task is to verify that the expenditure reported by partners in each progress report fulfills the following conditions. Okay, so one, that the costs are eligible, incurred and actually paid out. The program conditions and the approved application form and subsidy contracts have been observed. So therefore, our starting point when a project is approved is we get a copy of the final version of the application form, we get a copy of the subsidy contract, we get a copy of the signed version of the partnership agreement, we review those basically, and obviously then at that stage the project has been set up on the various IT system, portal, EMS or IOLA or whatever, and basically the situation then is that when partners start declaring expenditure, we proceed with the process of that expenditure. Next slide, please. Okay, the invoices, we need to check that the invoices are and payments are correctly recorded and sufficiently supported by the evidence. But therefore, that's the audit trail. The related activities, the subcontracted supplies and services are in progress or have been delivered or carried out. So, for argument's sake, if part of your project you're to maybe develop a website or deliver a service or something, and that was at application stage, it was planned to basically subcontract that out, that you've started your tender process, you go through that procedure, basically getting your number of quotations, evaluating the quotations and selecting a contractor for deliver. So that will all be part of the control check, and we would check to see that you've complied with the rules and regulations, that community rules have been respected, especially with regard to the information and publicity and public procurement, state aid, equal opportunities and protection of the environment. Procurement is a big area with the European Commission, and it's almost always checked on any projects that are subject to second level audit, and it's checked and all project partners as part of the first level control check. Next slide, please. Okay, the FLC do's and don'ts, basically. Okay, so basically what do we do? Well, FLC, first of all, we carry out administration verification, basically, which is our desk checks. Okay, it's a compulsory for each progress report. So if you're approved as a project partner and you submit your expenditure on the various portals or whatever, FLC will have to certify that. And it's a 100% compliance check on the expenditure declared, which means that we check all the budget lines and we follow the audit trail, check procurement, publicity, and so forth. Basically, what happens is, as you're familiar, a lot of you are familiar of submitting claims, expenditure is uploaded onto the IT system, as I said, either IOLA for EMS or Synergy, whichever one is applicable, and a copy of the supporting documentation is supplied to the controller. So claims, from the way we operate in the assemblies, that claims are certified on a first come first served basis, because we have 5 ETC programs and we have a constant turnover of claims coming through the system all the time. So it's first in, first out, basically, is the way we process our claims. Next slide, please. Okay, so as part of the first level control check, I said we're validating the expenditure. We have 4 options basically open to us as controllers. So when we're going through the audit trail, checking the expenditure, we can either validate the full cost as claimed by the partner. So you obviously put up your expenditure per budget line on the IT system, your staff costs, your travel and accommodation, your external expertise and services, equipment, whatever else. We go through those transactions. We look, follow the audit trail, check compliance with procurement, and so forth. And then if we're happy with those costs, we can say, okay, that's fine. We'll certify the full costs for the partner. If we're not happy with the situation, basically we have an option to modify the costs by reducing or increasing the initial costs. So the FLC will clearly have to indicate the eligible amount and to justify the modification through a drop-down menu. So basically, as part of the FLC check, we're asked to basically validate the amount. If the amount that was reported by the partner is incorrect, well, then there's a section for FLC difference where we have to put in basically the amount that we're either increasing the cost or decreasing the cost by, and then we have to explain the type of correction, FLC type of correction. So there's a pre-populated drop-down menu there basically, and we have a number of options to select from. So for example, like incomplete audit trail, missing evidence, incorrect public procurement, state aid errors, revenue generating errors, information on publicity errors, duplication of costs claimed twice, VAT not eligible, and so forth. So there are basically the various options, and then we certify the costs. Next slide, please. So then we can either reject the cost. Basically, we have an option to reject the cost. It can be removed from the claim, or if we're not happy with the cost, basically, we can leave it as this parked expenditure and leave it as a sitting duck on the IT system. Now that's applicable only for the EMS. Those of you that are used to using the IOLA for Interreg Europe, that facility isn't available there, and for the Synergy system, that's applicable for the RBAC program. That facility isn't available on that either. So when those 2 programs, basically, we either have to, as first level controllers, make sure we resolve those queries or issues relating to those particular costs during the certification process, or else we just have to take them out And then if the partner comes back in subsequent claims, whatever, with the proper backup documentation audit trail, we can then basically certify those costs in the subsequent claim. Next slide. Okay, as part of the administration verification check, the desk check, basically, first level controllers, we have to fill in a number of documentation as part of the control check. So we have to fill in first level control checklist. This checklist contains a series of questions where we're basically asked to take yes or no, and are non-applicable basically in that scenario. Now, there's quite a number of questions, and the backbone of the control check really is the FLC checklist. There's quite a number of areas to be covered as we're doing our control check, and there's no way of avoiding or taking shortcuts here or whatever like this. We have queries and set of questions pre-populated on the IT system relating to say the accounting system, VAT, audit trail, ERDF payments, net revenue, advance payments, whether a partner got an advance payment or not, on the spot checks, whether we carried out an on the spot check during that control check or not. Then all in the various budget lines, so your staff costs, obviously every project has staff costs. Your office admin is your flat rate, travel and accommodation, your external expertise and services, equipment, infrastructure and works. Again, as I said, procurement, and again that can be a big area if you have a couple of number of different procurement processes during the claim, during the period of a claim. We may need to fit in maybe a couple of checklists and procurement. There's a separate checklist for procurement for some of the projects, some of the partners. Information publicity, another area that we have to provide information on. Equal opportunity, sustainable development, and state aid. Share costs, and then there's a number of questions that can relate to lead partner, whether you're a lead partner or not. So obviously, depending on the budget lines, the amount of expenditure or the level of expenditure that you've reported, and depending whether you're a partner or lead partner, depends on the processing of the FLC checklist and the completion of that. It's with some of the larger projects, I mean, it could take us up to 3 hours alone just to fill in the FLC checklist on the IT system to go through it, because if it's not completed properly and all the boxes aren't ticked, it won't be processed by the lead partner. It'll come right back to be modified. So yes, it's a comprehensive document, and that's the way they're set out, and that's the way that the control process is set out was set out in the financial management and control and Article 72 statements at the beginning of these programs. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so again, another document we produce is the first level control cert. It's a one-page document basically. It sets out, it'll show on the document the amount of expenditure that has been certified, the amount of expenditure that initially was declared by the partner, the amount of expenditure that was certified by the FLC, and the amount of expenditure that basically that you're going to get paid on based on your intervention rate. Then we have to fill in the first level control report, and a number of questions on that relating to basically the methodology used, which is a desk check and on-site check. There's a suite of questions there as well. If there's an on-site to be completed, what was done when the on-site took place, where it took place, looking at the various claims, what checks were carried out and so forth. There'll be queries on the expenditure declared and certified per budget line. There'll be a summary of any adjustments, basically, in terms of what was carried out by the FLC, description of any the findings or observations or limitations, any conclusions or recommendations that the FLC would recommend for subsequent claims and issues to be followed up in obviously in the next reporting period, the next basic claim, whatever. So it's quite a comprehensive process, as I said. It was developed by the Commission with the assistance of Interact, and all documents together, the certificate, the checklist, and the report were known as the HIT documents, basically the harmonised implementation tools, and those documents are actually under review at the moment for the new programming period. But there's quite a lot of information to be fed into the system when as part of the control check. Basically, then when we complete that, we download the documents in soft copy, and we affix our signatures and stamp to them, and then basically they're uploaded to the IT system. Again, that's relevant to EMS. Unfortunately, with IOLF and Synergy, you can't upload any documents to those IT systems. When we're, as part of the control check and when we're completing, those documents are always emailed directly to the partner, so they have a copy of the documents that were signed off and processed by the first level controller. Next slide. Okay, just a summary, a quick summary again of what we do on the IT system. So, okay, documents to be submitted. So, making sure that all expenditure items are validated, ticked on tick the FLC box basically on the system. If it's not ticked, the cost won't go into the certificate, and therefore it won't be processed and you won't get paid on it. Again, filling in the FLC report and checklist, and uploading the relevant procurement checklist. As I said, if there's a couple of different FLC or procurement processes during the period of a claim, we may need to have a couple of FLC procurement checklists. Normally, for Northwest Europe anyway, there's a separate checklist for each process, and then we just issue the FLC certificate with the corrected amount, basically. So that's basically where we print off the documents, and then we just basically, as I said, upload those documents, and then we just hit a button then on the EMS system or on the IOLF system where the claim is moved on into the lead partner. Next slide, please. Okay, in addition into the on-site desk check, we're required to basically carry out an on-the-spot verification, which as part of the regulation. So the FLC will do the administrative on the spot. We're required at least to do one administrative check on site during the lifetime of the project, and we're also required basically where there's physical infrastructure being funded by the project or by the program. We're also required to carry out at least one physical on-site spot to check that piece of equipment or infrastructure that's being funded by the program. And we've a few different checklists that we use basically on site when we're carrying out these controls. Normally, when we're doing our on-site over the last number of years, we've left our on-sites basically to maybe the second last or last claim of the project, and we would basically select a sample of transactions from the previous claim certified, and you get notified in advance basically of that sample, and we would go out and check those into original documentation, check the audit trail, check bank statements, your payroll records and so forth, compliance with procurement, evidence of publicity. So we'd be looking for basically any plaques and posters, and obviously at the start of the program you would have contributed to a communication plan, so that should be in force. And then again, as I said, if there is any physical infrastructure that has been funded by the program, we go to check that it exists and that it basically is compliant with what was set out in the application form, and basically what and compliant with the procurement process, and obviously the invoices that came in and payments that for the infrastructure and works. Next slide, please. Okay, what we don't do, okay, basically we're not, first level control has no input or part of the application assessment or approval process for project partners. We're not involved in the day-to-day management of any projects. We're not involved in setting out any indicators for the project, setting or amending any partner budgets. We have no input in second level audit selection processes. We have no input in the payment of ERDF monies to project partners. And the most important part really for us is that FLC is that we're independent from the control partner. We're independent from the processes. We perform our first level control checks without fear or favour to any project partner basically, and we have to keep our independence from that, and we seem to be influencing any project partners are basically micromanaging any of the projects. in that case. So that's more or less what first level control is basically about. Next slide, please.